And I'm going to invite Jody Porter, who is presenting on the Task Force on Disability and Inclusion. And she is going to present first. She has a beautiful service dog here with you. And I got to have a special treat and a pat yesterday. But after that will be the presidential address. And so, Jody, welcome. I invite you to come and address our synod.
Yeah, there we go. Finding the microphone. Yes, it's here. All good. It's always reassuring to find a podium. Before I had a guide dog, I had a white cane. And finding a podium with a white cane is a wild experience, I have to tell you. You can flail and flail and flail, and heaven knows what you're going to connect with. Anyway, I am honored to be here today with this extraordinary room full of Anglicans. I've got to say that a room full of Anglicans is like a room full of pure sentience. I mean, the intelligence, the interaction, the joy of all of the sharing that has been going on since we arrived yesterday is beyond incredible. And it's always a joyful and delightful experience to be part of this. I must say, this is also a pretty intimidating audience. I've only been to one General Synod previously in Calgary. So many of you are veterans of multiple synods over the years. And listening to you, especially listening to you without the assistance of print, is like listening to people play three-dimensional chess with canon law. It's an amazing experience. So bless you all, and thank you for the honor of being here today. I'm here today to come from the other side of our ecclesiastical street, from a task force headed up by our Lutheran co-communal colleagues on ability and inclusion. We have been on an extraordinary adventure together, and I just want to open today by describing a little bit about the people who have been on this journey with me before I hopefully bring all of you in the room on the journey as well. So we're a small task force. Those are the best kind. The smaller, the better. 3 Lutherans and 1 Anglican in me. There we are. Who are we? Well, our premier layperson on the committee is a gentleman named Don Storch from Victoria. He is an eminent layperson in the Lutheran Church who has held many offices and knows his way around ecclesiastical politics perhaps better than most Anglicans. An effete gentleman, a background in social work and education. He belongs to a church where disabled people are not only welcomed, but so many of the accommodations, elevators, wheelchair ramps, Braille prayer books, sermons that can be translated into American Sign Language for our deaf community, they're all there. So clearly at one end of the spectrum in terms of accommodation and the capability of inclusion. At the other end, we have a wonderful pastor, Victoria Thurston, actually Victoria P. Thurston, who hails from rural Nova Scotia. She has a 10-point parish. Can you imagine that? A 10-point parish. So at the opposite end of the country and the opposite end of the physical capability of churches to welcome and include. But as she says, if you can't do it with neighborliness, it can't be done. So that's Victoria's end of the country and her positioning on issues relative to Christianity and disability. I am so proud to be co-chairing this committee with a wonderful woman from Ontario. She is a pastor in a town just up Lake Huron, and Bishop Todd has described the geography we're in, so she's pretty much northwest by north of here. little town of Zurich, and she is the pastor for that church, and she's been there for more than a decade. And she too has an extraordinary story to tell, because her eldest daughter is disabled, and her eldest daughter, whom I've talked to on the phone, describes herself as neurodivergent. And her daughter has had so much difficulty being welcomed in her mother's own parish church that she has, in fact, left in despair and tears and lost much of her Christian faith behind. A tragic story and a sad one, but regrettably not an unusual one. And because their sister was unable to countenance any level of welcome or inclusion in their mother's church, all of her siblings left as well. So it's a mother with a group of children who are outside the parameters and the acceptance of the church that she leads. Now, why is disability an issue for Christian communities? Well, let's take a look at where we are in Canada. A shockingly large number of Canadians self-identify as disabled. And I'm sure you're going to be surprised by this number. According to Statistics Canada, 27%, that is millions of Canadians self-identify as having a disability. And by disability, we don't just mean an ailment, or we've broken an ankle playing golf, or we've done something skiing or whatever, and we have a problem. We mean a mental or physical issue that transforms your life. It changes your access to mobility, perhaps your access to work, quite often your relationships with others and your inclusion with other people. It alters who you are in some ways, because suddenly people think of you as a blind person or a person in a wheelchair or a person who's somehow beyond the pale of being what we consider, it's an awful word, normal. So 27% of Canadians, and the sad thing is that many disabled Canadians do not feel a whole part of our Christian communities in Canada or internationally. And so our committee took a hard look at what the issues are, why they're there, and where can we go from here? And we have been on quite the journey indeed. Now, let me just give you a background of where we started. This is just a 2-minuter, and then the most exciting thing is where we would love to go. So the committee we inherited was not called the Committee or the Task Force on Ability and Inclusion. It was called the Task Force on Ableism. Anybody know the term ableism in the room? It doesn't sort of trip off the tongue. It's not exactly in the common parlance of our language. What is ableism? Well, it means discrimination in favor of able-bodied people, or discrimination against disabled people, same coin. It's a philosophy, it can be a political practice, it can be a social construct. It is a form of discrimination like so many others that our church and others have grappled with in terms of the struggle towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, that's ableism, but it's a huge canvas. And frankly, in Canada and in other countries, especially Western countries, so much has been done to address ableism. And let me tell you what's done, and then we're going to get to what needs to be done, and where churches have a very special and exciting mission. So way back when, I want to talk to the youth delegates here. If you can imagine this, I used to be young too, and used to care passionately about causes. In the 80s and 90s, I was part of a crazy group in the disabled community who just fought for our rights, fought everywhere, fought together, and we won a lot of battles. Together, we won inclusion in the preamble of our Constitution of the country, which is extraordinarily important to our laws in this country. We won one human rights commission after another, province by province across the country, in terms of writing of the generous rules of what are now called reasonable accommodation, what we are required to do to include disabled people in physical structures, in workplace situations, and so much more. In fact, the hotel across the street where we're all staying, the Hilton, is listed as a not dog-friendly hotel. That's good enough. But the reason my guide dog and I can stay there and be welcomed there is because of human rights law in Ontario. So much has been done, so much has been moved forward, and so many doors opened. And it's an exciting platform for us to consider and think about. The fight still goes on. It's never perfect. I've actually just been recently asked by the disabled community to be the lead litigant, get this, against the federal government because their websites aren't accessible to blind people. And our legal costs are being funded, well, by the federal government. So there you go. The beat goes on, the battle goes on. But what we have today is not some kind of foolish circular legal discussion. It is to take us to the title of my presentation, which is The Leper's Window. And we're taking you back to the 11th century, some 1,000 years ago. And we're going to think this through. Where do we stand? Where do we stand if we are at the leper's window? Of course, if you're a leper in that century, quite rightly, you're excluded because of public health issues. We've all been through COVID. Excluded from your community. You're outside the wall. And what churches did to provide, let's think about this, reasonable accommodation for the leper communities is they didn't allow them into the churches, of course, but so many churches, and you've seen them across England, across France, across all of Europe, have these amazing structures. You wonder what they are. Well, they're lepers' windows. And they're placed in one of the transoms, or they're placed towards the, nowhere close to a door, partway down the structure of the church. They're there, and they stand for something extraordinary. They stand for the fact that the church in the 11th century cared deeply about its leper community, so deeply that allowed them at least access at a distance to the Mass. And not only were they allowed to witness the Mass through the leper's window and view it and participate in it at a distance, but they were also allowed in many churches to receive the host. So let's think of the leper's window, as horrifying a relic as it is for so many reasons, as really a means of accessibility. So what our task force on ability and inclusion believes is that as Christian communities, we are still at the leper's window. We are good, we care about disabled people, we give them access, we want to share with them, but access is not inclusion. And that is a huge issue. So what is the principal barrier for us? Whether it's Dawn's church with the elevators, or it's Victoria's churches with a wonderful welcome to others, what is the barrier? Well, the barrier isn't accessibility. The barrier is our theology and the way we teach it. And I want to bring you today from the 11th century, where accessibility has been the norm in Christian churches for so many years, to the 20th and 21st century, to a whole new kind of theology that opens the doors wide, that gets us past the leper's window. And it is called disability theology. In 1994, an extraordinary woman, a disabled leader in the disabled community, she'd fought in the States for the Americans for Disabilities Act. She was a crusader in every sense of the word, literally and metaphorically. She became involved with her she was tortured by her sense of exclusion from Christianity, tortured by it, feeling outside, feeling not part of what was the whole community of Christ. So she wrote an incredible book, and the book is called The Disabled God. And what it puts aside in an incredibly radical rethink of the Gospels and Christian teaching is the link between sin and God's punishment in disability. It opens disabled people up to being wholly accepted with their diverse gifts into the Christian faith and being fully not just given access, but fully included in the whole community of God. And our wonderful task force, all four of us, read through extraordinary literature, and there are many, many, many books today, hundreds of books today, since 1994 on disability theology. There are now whole schools dedicated to disability theology. You can actually get a PhD in disability, you can get an MDiv or a PhD in disability theology. It is a vibrant, joyful, active, new, not rethink, but re-understanding of Christian teaching that opens the doors, not just the leper's window, to all of us in the disabled community. So this afternoon, I'm going to just run through very quickly what are considered to be the 10 primary tenets of disability theology. So if we could have that slide, I have no idea if there's a slide or not, but I'm very much hoping there is a slide with the 10 tenets. Also on your tables, you have a printed copy, just in case you didn't read the report, just in case. There's a printed copy of the 10 tenets of disability theology. And with the Lutherans who will be putting this, and it was part of their presentation at their conference in July, we too are bringing this forward co-communally with them to our General Synod today. So let me start at the top. The first tenet of disability theology is Imago Dei. We are all of us, disabled or not, made in the image of God. And for Nancy Eastland, who brings us to this extraordinary point, let us remember that the Christ we worship, the resurrected Christ, came back not with a healed and fixed body, surgically renovated body. He came back mangled from the crucifixion with a wondrously wounded body. And let us remember that it is through the broken body and the breaking of bread that each of us seeks grace. So the first tenet of disabled theology, Imago Dei. The second tenet of disabled theology is to remove the link between sin or punishment and disability. So often, people think of disability as a punishment. This goes through our Bible stories, it goes through centuries of teaching, it goes through so many assumptions even today. And I want to tell you a short story about what that feels like, because when I was a little girl growing up in London, Ontario, my dad had the parish up there on Warncliffe Road North, St. George's Anglican Church. My vision started to fail drastically. And my parents, having tried everything medically that didn't work, my mother quietly packed me in the car and took me south of the border. Anybody here heard of Oral Roberts? Okay, well, I was the lucky winner to be taken to a tent in the backwoods of Missouri to one of his great crusades. And I can remember the crowds and the enthusiasm and the Christian joy and the loving of people one to another. You could feel the emotion. It was palpable. It was extraordinary. It was beautiful. You could almost taste it. However, as the disabled little blonde girl from Canada, I was put in the lineup of somebody to be healed. And so I took my place in the line, and I can still remember the smell of the sweat in there to this day. Honestly, I can. I was put in the lineup to be healed, and God bless Mr. Roberts, but he was determined to get the demon out of me and make sure I could see again. He struggled, he held me, he blessed me, he pulled me into his chest, and he loved me and prayed over me and did everything. And can you imagine, as a little 7-year-old girl, when you're let loose and you've got this huge crowd of people around you and your vision isn't better? So some 60 years later, here I am, devil and all, I guess. We haven't moved much further and with much worse vision, but I know, as each of you know in this room, that I am beloved by my God, disabled or not. And that is what we need to hear. This is not sin or punishment. The third tenet of disability theology looks at the relationship between Jesus and disabled people. And often in our telling of the Gospels, we focus on the healing issue. And as disabled people, the blind, the deaf, the lepers, the people who have a mental disability or suffer from mental illness are simply healed and woof, whisked off the stage. But that isn't the complete story. Jesus is the extraordinary noticer, welcomer, reacher out to people with disability, even though they are on the edge of his society. He treats each of them as individuals with dignity, with honor, and with caring. And that is the example for all of us. The fourth tenet of disability is to distinguish between healing and wholeness. And what our disabled group tends to focus on is, it would be wonderful if healing could happen. None of us wants to be disabled. But the more important thing in being a disabled person is that you are welcomed in the wholeness of your Christian community as a whole person with everything that you are, unquestioningly. Tenet number 5 states that really a lot of disability is caused by medical issues or health issues, but a lot of it as well is caused by social issues. Social barriers can create disability, and so can church issues. Number 6, for that reason, number 6, what do we need to do as churches? Well, what we need to do is open our arms in radical hospitality to people with disability, and that's not just putting up a wheelchair ramp. That is reaching out to that individual and understanding who they are and welcoming their gifts, their capabilities, their whole selves into our Christian communities. Tenet number 7, suffering and lament. Suffering, well, we don't want to be referred to as sufferers, but there is lament. Clearly there is. And there is a place for that in Christianity, in Christian community. Everyone, when a child was born, the first thing you want to hear is the child healthy? You don't want a disabled little newborn born. No one wants a disability. I got to tell you, no one on earth wants to be blind. There is a lament to it. There is a pain. But there is also a life and a context, and one does not want to be thought of or sidelined as simply a sufferer. Tenet number 8, eschatology and resurrection. All right, well, Ms. Eisland, Nancy Eisland, and other disability theologians challenge the assumption that resurrection means coming back with a healed body. So that is a challenged assumption, one I'm not going to speak to. It's way beyond my pay grade in this universe. So anyway, there we are. Number 9, however, is my absolute favorite of all of these tenets. It is that disabled people bring a prophetic witness to their Christian communities. Well, it doesn't mean we can see the road ahead at all. But what does that mean? Well, we do, when we are included fully in a Christian community, we do bring issues to the fore of social justice and injustice, and we bring different gifts. They are truly different gifts, like the Magi to Jesus when he was born. What strange and exotic gifts those were. Well, there are reasons why our literature has been shaped and formed by blind writers or blind poets, Homer, Milton, and others, why Beethoven, in fact, created the best of his symphonies after he lost his hearing. We are grateful to Stephen Hawking, who could not move a single limb or digit, but in his extraordinary enforced stillness and immobility was the first to understand that there is not just multiple universes, but an infinity of universes. He led us forward. And so often is the disabled person who brings the gift that is necessary for peace, for harmony, for human connectedness. It is joyful and it is unexpected, and it is an extraordinary insight when we do it. So please let us bring disabled people into our communities and accept their gifts as we accept the gift of others. In the leadership of our churches, our national church, our provincial churches, our local churches, those are extraordinary moves forward. And number 10, which I think is an absolutely beautiful tenet, it's interdependence as opposed to independence. I've got to tell you, if you've got a disability, frankly, independent as you want to be and are, you do depend on other people. You do learn, not dependency, but interdependence. You learn a reliance on community. You learn what community is. You learn that the extraordinary prosody of human imagination and human behavior can bring you closer together, can knit the fabric more richly, can make the mountains dance. It is an extraordinary moment when you find your community and you feel fully part of it. And disabled people understand that perhaps better than others, not better than everyone, but better than many others, because it is the life we lead. So, tomorrow, Bishop Bell, my blessed diocesan bishop, whom I absolutely love, who has been leading in our diocese a study group on disability theology, incredibly exciting, is going to bring forward a resolution to the floor for debate. I'd like to put the resolution up there, which simply opens the door to our thinking through what is this all about? This huge movement that is all over the Christian world. Where will Anglicanism play a part? What is our role? How will we open the door? How do we make it part of our Christian life, and even more so, our Christian communities? So I'm not going to speak to that resolution. I'm a speaker, not a delegate, but our very articulate Bishop Bell will be on it tomorrow morning, I believe, and look forward to that. So I'm not going to speak to the resolution, but here's something. I'm going to leave you with an exhortation. And tomorrow during Bishop Bell's debate on the floor, discussion on the floor, I want you to think of this exhortation. And it is one from a prophetic voice, and not a Christian prophetic voice, and not a voice from the past, but a voice from the future. It is the voice of Mr. Spock from the Starship Enterprise. Any Trekkies out there? Are we good? Yeah, okay, all right. All right, so if you're a disabled person watching Star Trek is the ultimate epic in diversity. You hop from planet to planet at warp speed, investigating new life forms, some of whom you think are monstrous and horrible, but you learn from their wisdoms, their cultures, their understanding. It is a great, epic, cross-universal adventure in diversity. And I love it and champion it and can't get enough of it. And my favorite figure, of course, as many is dear Mr. Spock, who finally, after many decades of warriorship and guiding and navigating and being the wise man on board the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, he falls in love. But he doesn't fall in love with another Vulcan, not someone of his own race or culture or history. He falls in love with someone from a completely different solar system, someone from another planet with a different language, a different view, a different way to understand the world. And so what I want to leave you with, my exhortation to you all, are the words of his wedding vows. And those go beyond inclusion of disability. They are inclusive for every single one of us in this room. So here we go. Mr. Spock's words. I see that we are different. I see that we are different. Where we come from is who we are. Together, let us be more. Thank you.